Now, you should have done some reading on Perlin noise and how it's not purely random. It generates random patterns with interpolation between points. That means that it's smooth between the points. Now, in Blender, what we can do is we can create these kind of patterns and use it to generate landscapes of sorts. So I'm going to add a mesh, add a plane, and scale it up. And hit tab and subdivide it a bunch of times, maybe that many times, that'll do. Now, if I go to material, I'm going to apply a new material. It doesn't really matter what color, I'll just make it a light green. And then in the texture panel, which is next to it, I'm going to make a new texture. This texture type is going to be clouds. Okay, now down here on the basis, I'm going to set it to either improved Perlin or original Perlin. Now, you could set it to one of these other ones. Some of them are quite cool. And you can talk about those different algorithms too. So this noise generation. All of this is noise. So you can set soft, hard noise, color noise, which we don't really need. So anyway, once I've got a texture generated here, I'm going to go back to the modifiers and add a displacement map and select that texture. You'll see here that it then displaces every one of those vertices along that map. Now, if I go into top-down view here and then switch back to the textured mode, I'll just change this so it's hard, and I'll put on a subsurface modifier, bring that up there. Okay, go back to here. It is a little bit hard to match these points up, so I might just, so it's quite hard to match them up. I'll set the size to be a bit bigger. That way I should be able to match them up without a problem. Okay, so looking at this here, I can see that there's this ridgy pattern here, and I can quite clearly see that ridge pattern in there. So high points go up and low points go down. Now I prefer the soft rather than the hard part. And if I put it on crackle, for example, okay, it creates some really interesting looking shapes. If I go back to displacement, I can turn the strength of this down. And, oops, I went too far with that. Okay, so to 0.1. And I can get some really cool looking effects here. Now this could be used as the basis for a pathway, paving stones on the ground. It could be used as a basis for some kind of desert map. If I look at some of these other things, cell noise, okay, it could be used as the basis for some kind of science fiction based texture. If I look at some of these other ones, a lot of these other ones are useful for landscapes. So if I turn the strength of this one up, I might just make, this one actually looks like paper, but it could possibly be used as the basis for an ocean in a static image. There's a lot of these ones here. The Perlin noise is definitely the best for landscape, especially for things like rolling hills and stuff. Blender Original is based on Perlin noise. Okay, so I can go with that. And then in the displacement, depending on how strong I want this displacement effect to be, I can go, well, let's do it flat, and I'll turn that subdivision surface off. Okay, render it flat. So depending on how strong I want it to be, I can get bigger features, smaller features. Going back to this texture, I can play around with these different ones here. This Voronoi one seems to have kind of peaks, quite sharp peaks and smooth troughs. That would actually be quite good for generating static looking water. There's a lot of other things in here as well. Now the difference to note between the Perlin noise and just pure random noise, this is pure random noise, just random black and white on here. Okay, random black and white everywhere, like the kind of noise that you might have seen on a very old TV. It's not any good for generating landscape. It might be all right for generating something like hair particles on an object. If I turn the strength of this stuff down, okay, I've got some I'm not sure what it could be used for, but probably not terrain. It doesn't look realistic at all. If I use some of these other ones, okay, there's marble generation. That could actually be used for terrain. Now, some of them, like this here, it's got some steps, okay, depending on what effects I was looking for. I could then apply it with other stuff as well. So I could do another displacement modifier on this. So if I make a new texture, I'm going to hit plus, and this texture is going to be clouds, and it's going to be improve Perlin. So I've got two textures here, and I will go into here. Whoops. That's my base texture that I want. Hold on. No, that's not it. I want to delete that one. Go into here. That's set to texture 01. I'll set it to that one. And if I add a new displacement modifier, okay, and I'll set it to the other one, I'll make sure the strength isn't too much. But I can then randomize that a little bit. So if I turn this off, it's just that. If I add it, I can combine these together. So I could combine multiple textures. Let's add a new one. This type is going to be, I'll just make it pure noise. Okay, so I'll go to there, and that's going to be that one. That's going to be that one. And I'll add another displacement texture to it. I can join these together and turn the strength right down on this one here to 0.05. And I'll make it even smaller, 0.01. Okay, and then I get a lot of little variations. A lot of little variations. It could be stones, it could be anything on my normal terrain. Okay, so when you're creating an example for this kind of displacement mapping or noise generation, this is the kind of thing you want to create an example with. Explain how they can be combined together to create unique effects. Okay, provide this sort of example in Blender. So what happens when you just do one of them? Okay, so just random noise, okay, something like that. Then when you apply a pattern that creates these kind of, what would you call it, plateaus or steps. And then, I've also done the Perlin noise on there. Okay, even without the steps one, that looks a lot better than just that. Okay, it looks a little bit, I could turn this down to 0.05. Sorry, 0.005. Okay, and then I get that very slight variation, and that just looks a lot better than pure smooth. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff that they use in game development to generate terrains. Now they might manually sculpt it after that, but generating terrains in game development, a lot of large terrains start off with this, and then they'll have placement of trees and other objects within the world, painting the textures on, applying it in different ways. But it generally will start with some kind of noise algorithm. Then maybe some sculpting. Okay, so you don't need to really go into this part here, but sculpting. So if I was to grab this, I can pull parts of these up here. That's looking a bit messy. I didn't mean to do it like that. If I go back to here, so I can sculpt these different areas. The reason it's changing is because whenever I make a change, it's always going to recalculate that noise. So that's why it looks like it's shimmering. Okay, so they'll make some changes to it, make it look more realistic. But that's the general gist of noise generation and how it can be used in something like terrain creation.